Welcome back, Timeline. I'm your host, Tania, and this is The Most Interesting People on My Timeline, a series and archive dedicated to exploring the digital space and how it affects the lives and work of my most interesting online friends. If you're new here, welcome. On this podcast, we talk about the internet space and various creative and professional processes and career paths, but most importantly, we talk about it with interesting people in various fields who I've had the pleasure of engaging with online and IRL. If you're not new here, thank you for showing up for the penultimate episode of this season. If you're watching the visual version, excuse my lack of on-screen commentary. I am back home in Georgia and I did not bring my setup, but no worries because the start of the show is obviously the interview anyways. As always, you can listen to all episodes anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as watch a visual version on Spotify and YouTube. You can find links to all of this and more in the description box of whatever platform you're listening on, but also make sure to visit taniadoes.com/interesting people for bonus content, including a playlist of my favorite songs from this season's guests. This season is season 3, I refer to as a Sonic Slay season because all of our guests are successfully slaying in the music business. Today's episode features LA-based artist and activist Soultree, who has worked closely with Bo, who we spoke to back in episode 7, and Paulo Rain, who we spoke to in episode 10. So you'll hear Soultree mention them in this episode a little bit. You can find more info and links to Soultree's work in the description box of whatever platform you're listening on or on taniadoes.com/Soultree. Welcome to this episode of The Most Interesting People on My Timeline. Let me introduce you to Soultree.
Well, peace, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast, Tania. My name is Soultree. I was born Stephanie Kamba in the Philippines and raised in the Marshall Islands, which is in the South Pacific. In Micronesia, and I lived there till I was 11, and then I moved here to the US, lived in Arkansas, Chicagoland, and now I'm here in Tongva Territory, unceded Tongva Territory, Los Angeles. And I've been creating music for about a decade now. I started with organizing before, so I was a student organizer, youth organizer, and I contributed my poetry to a lot of political actions and fundraisers. And it wasn't until, really my adult life that I really pursued my true passions. I was always singing here and there, at social functions and covering other artists and doing my own poetry. But it wasn't until I was 22 that I started really writing my own music with the hip hop collective and really imbuing everything that I learned on street organizing around labor rights, racial justice, immigrant rights, gender justice, LGBTQ rights. All of that, I really use music as an outlet. It's my way of really connecting to spirit. And in that journey, I've also picked up a few other tools that have helped me, from herbalism to body work, Reiki, and tarot. And every modality that I picked up was really informed by needing to support community and wanting to find some kind of practice and just an essence and way that would humanize me. A lot of times when I was organizing, I felt very dehumanized by the act of organizing, some of the actions that we did. And also it was empowering, of course. It really uplifted me. And there was ways that I felt more human by the knowledge that I was being given. But I also felt like there was an aspect of the militancy part, this part that we have to occupy such a violent space when we're organizing, that affected me mentally and physically. And so that's what brought me to a more holistic path, and to really not just put my own life on the line for this idea of our liberation, but using the modalities that I choose, that I want to be part of, music and the way that I relate with other people and how I bring people together, as a way of getting free. That in and of itself, believing that that's enough, and really rooting back into my cultures that precede undocumented and my lineage that precede citizenship. And that's really where I'm at now as a person, is wanting to live my authentic truth as a non-binary, undocumented being, and to also know that my spirit and my essence is beyond title and status and papers, and that I'm just so much more connected and rooted now than I ever was. And I'm continuing to create. I just started producing this year, really getting into awareness of visuals, not just in my visual design work and some of the video work that I've been doing here and there, but in the way that I'm connecting with other artists and trusting my work with other people and growing and expanding it with them. So that's me in a nutshell.
Maybe my first question that comes out of that is just like how did it start with music, and in your practice, how has music been that driving force, because you moved around a lot. Migration is also just like this whole complicated thing, like but what rooted you to music, and in using that and pursuing that now?
Yeah, I actually shared this recently that my first recording was when I was 3, and it was a tape recording that we found the day that my grandfather was transitioning. So this tape recording, this cassette, had my sister singing this song called Bulaklak, which means flower, and she's like, "Ang bango ng bulaklak," and it's a sad ballad, and you hear my grandfather in the background like, "Oh, nakakaiyak yan," which means that's so sad, it makes me cry. And then I think you hear the other women in my family, like maybe my grandmother, aunt, and mom, but you really just hear me breathing. Other than my sister singing, you hear me into the mic. So that was like my first recording ever, and I just want to put that out there. This is official. This is a world premiere, release of that information. But my family, we all migrated to the Marshall Islands slowly and surely through my grandfather, who was a technician. He worked on refrigerators, which, as you can imagine, an island near the equator in the Pacific needs a technician for refrigerators. So he worked for a grocery store. And thankfully, with that job, he was able to petition my entire immediate family, my parents, my uncle, my aunt, and my grandmother on my mom's side, as well as me and my sister. And so when we came together, karaoke is a way that we were able to heal and talk about certain things without actually talking about them. Karaoke was like a really big center point in our social lives, and I would always sing, and me and my sister would make up dances. We had little dance troops, and I would sing in church, and I always felt misunderstood by my family. I had like kind of a temper and anxiety, and it was all because of all of these pressures that were placed on me. And I think I knew very young that I was different, that I'm non-binary, that there was just a certain way that I related to genders that was very confusing to people and that misled them. And because of the way that I look and how people perceive me, like I was very exoticized and like hypersexualized as a young person. And so I think this point of misunderstanding from both my family and the communities that I grew up with, and the fact that there was so much religious suppression of colonized countries like ours, it made me go to music to find, again, that sense of humanity, that sense of wholeness, and that sense of like freedom from all these like physical pressures that people would put on you and these labels that people would put on you. And that was the same, that pattern continued and continues in my life. And when I started organizing more actively around immigrant rights and specifically doing direct action work where we were challenging the law and doing civil disobedience as well as direct action, music was a way for me to have fun, to play, to get out of this. There's this, when you meet your oppressors on purpose because you're trying to change the law with your body, it affects you. It affects your cells, it affects your energy. And because I had the outlet of music, it allowed me to amplify those feelings, but also to release those feelings in a way that was more conducive. But it wasn't always conducive. Sometimes I would just like repeat the same cycle and go in this mode of martyrdom, even in the way that I did my music. It took many years for me to stop just making music for the movement or making poetry for the movement, and really finding my sense of self, that I am a human being and the organizer is as important. The individual is in there. We are part of like a whole greater movement. And if we're sacrificing every, like the humanity of the people that we're organizing with, it wasn't really it wasn't really freedom, it wasn't really liberation. And I found my place in music. I found my place in song. And I've always sung, but hip hop specifically helped me liberate some of the feelings, especially rebalancing my feminine divine and my masculine divine, and acknowledging that masculine, that yang energy that's really unapologetic. Hip hop allowed me to liberate that. And so I'm really grateful to have music as a tool for my own personal mental health.
When you're mentioning like protesting and music and like within the movement, but then also trying to like remember your individuality with that, like struck a chord for me because it reminded me of like a couple years ago, like I had made this playlist called undocu, and it was these all these songs. They had nothing to do with immigration at all, but there were lines in them that would remind me of my status, and it would make me like really sad. And so then but since then I've like learned to kind of like accept when I am like outside of my status, through even through music. But that's just something that made me think of. But in talking about all these points of like inspiration and influence and talking about hip hop, can you talk a little about like specific artists or like other genres that kind of influence your music? I know you have some influence in like, it sounds like reggae, but also like hip hop is the main one. Yeah, just talk about any of those influences.
Yeah, I have way too many influences. Honestly, I feel like every era of hip hop is important and is necessary. As much as like every genre like hates on each other, like I love drill, I love boom bap, I love lo-fi, I love just, straight rap, and I love hip hop. So I think for me, I don't I'm Gemini, so I really struggle with choosing. I'm not the type to like just choose. But of course, like most femmes in hip hop, like Lauryn Hill was really influential for me growing up. Um, and I think, I listened to some of the rappers that were heard in our island were, Biggie and Tupac. I feel like um, being in Chicago, a lot of local artists really affected me. Like being in Elephant Rebellion, which is a social justice based hip hop collective, really influenced me. I want to name Randy Magigad and John Vietnam, who are API rappers, Filipino and Vietnamese, respectively. They both died when they were very young, and it was a big loss for our community in Chicago each time one of them passed. So like in Randy passed in 2010, and John passed in 2013, I want to say. So I'm very rooted in local music as well, especially within my Chicago community. And there's certain rappers like that are more chill, like vibes, like Akua Naru. I grew up with R&B though, so my mom, like we would listen to Whitney Houston, Toni Braxton, Mariah Carey. I also grew up listening to Bob Marley, with reggae. But as I grew older, I like really expanded my awareness of reggae, like listening to people like Gregory Isaacs, and also Beres Hammond. And there's so many artists out there. I really Marsha Griffith, uh, the I3s, and even the neo reggae revival, they say. There's a lot of so many, like I feel like within each genre there's so many different generations, and so that's why it's like really hard for me to pinpoint artists that I feel like, oh yeah, that's like a big, like the main influence. But I feel like I flow between different genres. And when I was in Arkansas, all we listened to was like alternative music and slightly rock, because it was, other than that, it was like Christian music over there. And also living in Arkansas like made me really love Southern rap a lot. And there's that beef between East and West Coast. But me, like I was in the South and then I was in the Midwest. So I've always been more in the central communities, and I love Outkast, and that's kind of being a migrant also influences how I listen to music because it's, determines how, what kind of music is available. And, I love Aaliyah, I love R&B, even though I don't make R&B, like I thought I would be making R&B and I still do. It's just like, that's not where I landed and that's not the energy that came out from Jump in the last decade that I've been making music. So, yeah, I love jazz, of course, too. I went to, in high school, I was, in different groups like traditional choir, church choir, jazz choir, and also like taking classical voice lessons because that's the only voice lessons that were accessible in the suburbs. And I really did want to, be more rooted in other genres and cultural music, but it wasn't until like my adulthood that I really accessed that. Even like awareness of, Filipino political um, history. I really had to look for it myself because the internet wasn't what it is now in the last like 30 years. And something I've been really exploring in the last decade is learning about Filipino cultural music and even knowing where my community and ancestry is from. Because when I went to the Philippines in 2015, I met my some of my relatives for the first time through DACA, and which I lost in 2018. For I won't go into that right now how that happened, but um, I met some of my relatives. I've met some of my dad's aunts, and they were speaking a whole different language to me. So I really learned the different ethno-linguistic groups that I was part of, that I was Waray, that I was Ilonggo, that I was Pangasinense. These are, I never knew that these were my family's lineages until I went to the land and they had to tell me themselves because these were stories that my parents couldn't tell me. So really, I'm only now diving more deeply into Filipino cultural music, even though I kind of grew up with it. Like I did Filipino cultural dance a little bit, and I also did started doing Filipino martial arts in the last few years, but I didn't really understand or have a grasp of the depth of Filipino cultural music because it wasn't accessible, especially the ones that are done by indigenous people and by the working poor. But now it's becoming more mainstream, so I'm getting more access and more people are diving into their culture. So that's been a huge blessing for me. And that reggae piece too, like comes from being from the Pacific. In the Pacific, like Jamaican music, specifically reggae, has influenced the entire world and has specifically influenced islanders across the globe in a really impactful way.
Yeah, I agree, and I think like that makes me think of like my dad. He when he first got here, he like learned English by playing like Bob Marley and like Outkast. I grew up in Atlanta, and so like you said, kind of like Southern like hip hop was also like what my dad used to learn English, and I just kind of listened to it in my like 3-year-old self in the car. Um, and so like that, those are all such cool influences, and then like for me personally, like the internet was also an influence, and you kind of touched on this, that like the internet back then is not the internet that it is now, but as you were moving around and as you like you got, I guess, internet presence or started using the internet, how did that shape like your sense of culture or your artistic vision?
It expanded, it broadened my interest even more. I wanted to, like, I love global music. I love music from every culture. I feel like every um culture has its story. And I remember being in my teens going to this radio station from one of my older friends that was going to college at the time, and I was at the radio station and I heard some music from East African women. It was like a compilation CD and it sounded like Marshallese to me, and I was like, wow, like the connections of the diaspora, like people linking Austronesian culture to the African diaspora, and hearing the influence in the language themselves is so powerful to me. And I just love learning new music, and I even love music that's just like instrumentals and brass. So I love to learn in general anyway. So the fact that I started gaining more access to the internet and gaining more access to community and people has really opened me up. I feel like that's why it's hard for me to say I have like a favorite in anything or to name that, because I would say I have a favorite in every subculture and every genre. And so I feel like I'm not really, I wouldn't want to answer those questions specifically unless we had like a whole hour just for that question. You know what I mean? Because I would love to nerd out on every single thing. And I think that would give folks a better idea of where I'm coming from. Um, because I do have a very different and original sound, and I have a lot of influences in older and newer music that I like to, reference. But overall, I am just the way that I was seeking a culture that reflected me. I seek that in my music by creating that. And I don't think there is, I'm a unique being, we're each unique beings. And so until we each create our own original, art and sound, we're just trying to create our own reflections.
Yeah, and like speaking of that, like original piece, like the Gems album, like that was, I think, like I kind of saw the stuff from the beginning with the Seed and Spark, and like even up to now. I was actually listening to it because I was doing like an art project for my friend's birthday, and I was listening to it, and it was just like super like chill and like nice. It was good. I was vibing out to it. But yeah, well, like what is that creative process like, and specifically with that project that had so many components to it?
Yeah, so that project came out of moving here to Tongva from Chicago, land of the three fires. And me and my partner were actually like robbed at gunpoint in July of 2019. And we had a storage unit here because we moved here in 2016, but had to move back because in 2017 because my partner's studio shut down. And so we built another studio in Chicago from 2017 to 2019. And right after we finally put the last piece in, like later that week, we got robbed at gunpoint. There were 7 guns on us and 2 cars that, they took our car, they took our bags. And I was really lucky I had my phone and keys somehow. And I like was able to call our friend. But that was a really big, impactful moment. And there's a lot of uh examples in the world of people that experience near death experiences, and even though we were unharmed, unscathed, it really could have gone down in the worst way. And I remember I actually had a water bottle from Bo on me, and when I gave my backpack to one of the robbers, I dropped the loud as aluminum bottle on the sidewalk, and I was like, fuck, this is it. But I just, went into this place of surrender and humanity. When I saw these robbers, I was just like, you know what, y'all are human, and whatever happens is going to happen. And I just like surrendered to the universe. And it really affected me in the way that I feel like there was a lot of truths that I was hiding because of respectability politics, of like, being an organizer and working with young people and elders. There was a self that I wasn't really sharing. I wasn't really sharing my queerness as loudly. I wasn't really sharing my political beliefs as loudly. That's, whether it's using cannabis, THC as my medicine, and other herbs and other beliefs that I have that are a little bit far-fetched and not mainstream. I felt like that experience made me just be more true. And so Gem came out of that place for me personally. And I do believe for my partner too, because we both, moved to Tongva, and we were living in this sublet where really we would garden often. And that's like really what held our sorrow, what held our trauma, our PTSD. um and it was hard for me to be around, both of us to be around like community or people, like a large group of people for a long time because of that experience. And Gem was our way of like talking about some issues that we might not have been able to if something else went down that night. And Gem was the story of us coming back to Tongva and also being real with ourselves. And for me, it was me just being unapologetic and trying a new sound and just at it in a harder way than I had. I feel like my last album before Gem, the Soultree EP, was super gentle and super like it was 5 years worth of music in in 6 tracks. And it was very organic, but I feel like it was still very safe. And Jem was kind of opening up something more, something deeper. You know, the coke, it's kind of symbolic because my Soultree EP, it's a coconut. And so the coconut's like more on the surface. It comes from a seed, it becomes a big plant. Jem, you got to dig for that. You got to dig for the truth. And I think the fact that I went through a near death experience and, you know, we just went through kind of, like a just a loss, a big loss, you know, energetically, just feeling feeling like we gave so much to the city, and this is the reality that our community deals with. We were really heartbroken, um, not just because of our own personal experience, but the fact that that's like so commonplace where we are from. And yeah, Jem, I just really spoke my truth and really grappled with some topics that I hadn't before as publicly. And we just went in it like between 2019 and the beginning of 2020. So right before the lockdown, all of that music came together within a few months of healing.
And talking, about healing, because like that in itself was like such a it's like a powerful moment you go through. Kind of, you said, yeah, like at some you were like just surrendering to the universe. Like you also have there was like the community that came together for the event when Gem came out. And it had like people who were, they had a market, and there were people who were artists and poets and healing, and like even organizations that like were healing organizations. So how did that come about in planning that event? Maybe my question is also like why was that event, like how you chose to showcase this project to everyone?
Yeah, I think it's another YOLO moment, you know, where I had been trying to get it, you know, me and Paolo worked on it for, you know, such a long time in 2021. And, you know, our Seed and Spark didn't even, we made 10% of what we were hoping to make. And maybe not even 10, but we put so much effort and labor. And it was so iconic for us because we really lived out the reality that we are worthy as undocumented people, that even in a pandemic we were just going to go for it. We were going to ask for 70K for a visual album. And I love how ambitious we were, and I love how we, you know, really believe still that we deserve that kind of presence and that kind of support. And dropping gems was born out of me just wanting to release. You know, it's like just needing to give birth to something. And over time, in the last couple of years, I've just built community through my healing work, through my music, and things just started aligning. And I was connecting with these artists, and some artists that were part of the show I've known for many years, and some of them I've just met recently. And so I had been talking to many different artists, from dancers to DJs to you know, MCs and to singers and vendors in the last 3 years, or I guess in the last, yeah, 3 years that I was here and that I moved here. And so it really was time. It felt like time. It felt like we had the right team. It felt like we had necessary resources. And even though it was like such a push, it was such a push to do this show. And it was so, I did a lot. I did a lot personally. Like I did have a team and I did have a lot of support, specifically from my girl, DJ One Love. Um, and from Shiro's of Shiro Collective, and DJ One Love and I are in Babailan Collective, and a bunch of other artists that were MCs, were, you know, dancers, were, you know, performers and vendors. All of them, we've been building together through the pandemic, and it felt like necessary to drop this gem, in this way, and to center femmes and thems. And it felt like we had the, like I had been talking to people for years about this album. At this point in 2022, we dropped it in November, but the album was pretty much done in 2020. So there's been many iterations of trying to galvanize people, and it really came down to like me pushing and believing that it needed to be done, even if it felt like it was going beyond our capacity. And, you know, it was a big undertaking to bring in that many vendors, that many volunteers, and that many performers. But I do not regret a single thing, because that's how much I want to give. That's how much I want to offer and how thoughtful and intentional I want to be with my shows. And I wanted to set precedents because I was doing a bunch of, I'm really easily swayed by my friends to just support what they're doing. And I think that's one of my lessons in life, according to astrology, is that I need to just do my own thing. And so dropping gems was my way of being like, this is my own thing and this is how I do it. And I just needed to plant that seed because I'd been such a big support for so many other people's events and so many other people's projects. I needed to do this for me, and the right people came through, and I'm very, just honored that we were able to drop it.
No, I love seeing like when all of that comes together, because kind of like I always feel like talking to people, there's always those moments of like you've just been thinking about something or you've been talking about it and then actually getting to do it and like share it. That is when you're like, okay, all of that was like worth it. And it's like it's cathartic for me whenever that happens for me. So I love seeing that. And the video came out, like I've seen the videos from the event and it looks like such a fun event. And
Thank you so much.
yeah. Um, my next question, maybe it talks more about this kind of holistic approach to music, because you're also doing community work, but you also, I believe, like work with an organization that's holistic healing. You've mentioned Reiki, and astrology and tarot, and one of like your songs even is a meditation. So like, yeah, what are some of those other ways that you incorporate that into your work? Because yeah, like how do you incorporate that?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been doing meditations and bringing sound bowls to my performances, and I was doing breathing exercises for organizing space, and it didn't really go so well. It was like every time we tried to do a breathing exercise, there was like a raid, and we would have to go somewhere and like do some direct action or do some like deportation support. Like literally, we would always have to put the breathing meditation in the garden or the parking lot, and it was so, wow, it was like such a monumental moment for me when I realized like, wow, we really, I had to step away of that out of that particular organizing space because it didn't even allow space for undocumented breath. You know what I mean? And so every different modality came at a really pivotal point. Like I started doing I did massage on my parents and my grandparents, their faces and stuff growing up. And we call it hilot, which is just general healing. And some people make it more of a big deal that like, oh, you only have to be a certain lineage and you have to be taught. But I come from a different, mentality, being an undocumented person that's, also lost a lot of like lineage, and a lot of my family has moved to the city. So we've lost our indigeneity, so to speak, in our way of life. And so doing this holistic work is my way of just first like healing myself, because we each have, every single person has a lot to heal, and to act like you can facilitate support for someone's healing without addressing your own wounds is not responsible and very problematic. And so I was recognizing these fundamental challenges and root causes of some of our challenges, and I really wanted to address it in a felt way. So when I do work through SHA, my practice, sustainable holistic healing arts and activations, I have in mind, root centered, root approaches to oppression and to struggle and to violence. And I host sound baths with my community. I did one on Monday, and it's really a beautiful exchange and really supporting other people, because I've walked my journey, and I'm still walking that journey, and I still have teachers and people that teach me many other ways of life and philosophies. But doing this herbal work is really really good for my own personal mental health. It's good for my body and my mind. It's good for my presence and my meditation. And so I love being able to learn more about that and offer it to my community. And I'm finding people that are seeking that as well. And I really believe in that for our people, because there's just as far as like any practice or any labor, it's like undocumented people are so kicked out of it. It's like, if I don't have ties to the land, can I not be part of these modalities that are ancestrally ours, if I can't go back to, my home country, am I less like of a member of my family? It's just like all these questions of, do you even belong because you're so uprooted? But when I do these practices, when I work with this medicine, when I offer sound healing and I connect with people, citizen or not, I feel like it's an existence that is beyond this 3D, and it is a connection that is beyond this lifetime. It's much deeper than that, and it helps me maintain hope, and it helps me maintain just more of a divine connection, because so many of the things that we've studied and practiced is really disconnecting us from our sacredness and relationship to divine.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, I know you sent me a couple of the events. Like, unfortunately, I couldn't go, but and I plan to move down, to like the LA Tongvaland area, like like within the year. But like here in Oregon, like that's when I first started getting a little bit of sense of community that was more like attuned to healing, but also through the internet, surprisingly. And that's just helped me. I think for a long time, I was like very uprooted and thinking about like, oh, my status and like what's next. We're always like thinking about like future and uncertainty, but it helped me like be like present. So that I really appreciated that in your work. And like, I know there might be other people that are doing that, but it was the first time I'd like experienced that in music. That like specifically and intentionally through your work. And maybe like thinking about like other spaces, digitally, like I said, I've come across a lot of things, and like thinking about music, we're talking about AI and like NFTs and things like that. Is there any, and like social media promotion for indie artists too, is there anything in that digital realm that you're excited for, and anything that you're a little wary of, or like, oh, I don't know what this is going to bring?
Hmm. I appreciate that question a lot, because we, my generation, I feel like is like the last one to have certain things that, dial up internet. A lot of folks in this generation don't know. And I get it. I saw that the person responsible for AI at Google like resigned, and there's a lot of fear. And I can't say what's gonna come. I am excited for certain um tasks that are mundane to be done electronically as opposed to people having to do it. I do wish that the way that we work with technology is to alleviate and support people rather than suppress them further. That is my hope, but of course it's going to go the other way. Before, we always have to like go the extreme in the most violent way and then temper ourselves, it seems like, is our pattern as a species. And I do believe that indigenous folks and people that are more rooted to community are on the prevention side of that. But at the same time, I know that there are artists that and people that would benefit from using AI, just on the level of not having capacity to create and just wanting to create. I don't like the theft aspect of it, and I don't, and I mean in anything, but there are people um, that are doing what analog work, but still stealing from each other. So I feel like it's a very nuanced conversation. I'm excited for people to be able to create on their own. I don't want AI to take all of our creative jobs, obviously. I think that's what's being speculated about this writer strike here, happening now, that they're just going to outsource writing to AI for a while. But I really believe that I am a in-person type of person. That's what I learned in during COVID, was that, man, when we went to digital, I still just prefer to hold space in a personal interaction, in a real interaction, but to grow in a more accessible way, like having the digital is a really important way to proliferate. And I think it really is, and I'm gonna go philosophically here, but I really feel like we all are agents of our own change, and some people do just want to grow fast and grow big, and doesn't matter who is being jeopardized, which is why, this is the whole immigration conversation is like creating caste systems and oppressing people of color in particular and gendered people in particular, femmes and non-binary and queer folks. And so I feel like I pray that it becomes a tool of accessibility and of you know, outsourcing labor that doesn't need to be done by humans so that humans can actually live. And so I'm excited about how this technology will actually support people as well. And even thinking about how we can be supportive to people with disabilities on the accessibility and disability justice movement. And I don't want to be, I think precautionary is important, but I don't want to be like spreading fear. I don't want to be part of like the fear agenda. Yeah, we can be preventative, but I don't want the emotion around it to be like this combative fear and us and them thing, because I'm seeing a lot of people post in ways that are, combative, and it's like, is that really the energy we that isn't that like just repeating this cycle of combat that we're already in? So I really, I really can't, I feel like I don't know if I really spoke to that question, but that's just where I'm at. Is we will we will all see together. I don't know enough about that technology, and I don't use that technology enough to say that I can predict anything, but I'm always going to be on the side of prevention, but also we have to be innovative. There was a lot of ways when I started organizing in Chicago in 2012, where it was hard for us to bring in elders because they didn't use email, they didn't use Facebook, and so we had to still like print our flyers and like hand it to them personally, and now like they're all on Facebook. So it's not all like the end of the world as we sometimes think, but it's going to be, it's still going to emulate the cycles that we've had. Like people thought NAFTA would be a good thing for trade, and instead it just like oppressed people, and exploited workers, particularly the melanated ones. And so yeah, I feel like I think it's important to really learn from the past, like, and to take everything with a grain of salt, both the innovation and the desire to remain more analog.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and with there has to be like a balance. I know, like for me, like I think I was just like on TikTok, and it was like there was like an AI cover. It was like Lana Del Rey singing like a cumbia or something, or like another song, and I'm like, wow, this is like, oh, this is like, it was a little funny at first, and then I was like, this opens up a Pandora's box of a lot of things and a lot of feelings. So yeah, I think that there just needs to balance. I don't know if we've ever found it or if we will, but I'm I like, even with like thinking about, even when virtual assistants came out, like you said, sometimes they could have been really helpful for people. But for example, I think my friend got an Alexa for her mom, but her mom was like, this Alexa's in English, like what am I supposed to do with it? I speak Spanish.
Right.
So yeah, there's always those opportunities sometimes we don't take to
True.
help those that need it, yeah, and make it accessible. Mm.
Yeah. And even thinking about you know, people that were resisting technology in the past, like it does have innovation as long as we apply it that way. It does have like benefits to us as long as we apply it that way and make it accessible to everyone. And we can't deny that in our long history, there's been so much propaganda that's been made up about each other, that AI is just a more digital version of that, and no matter what, like AI is just a tool that's illuminating both our shadows and our light. So we have to treat it that way. And anything that comes up, it was already in us, AI just enhanced it, and that's a big, I think eventually I do trust in the universe that it'll balance it out, even if it's at our own extinction, which is very plausible. So, and I do think necessary, as much as I love humans, I do think that eventually we'll be obsolete and there'll be some other species here, and that's okay. That's part of the spirituality that I gained access to in this journey. It's like, honestly, we're kind of like really like human centered, and this planet is not just ours, it's so many others.
Right. Yeah. I like asking that question just because like it's such a big topic right now, but also like it brings up the bigger picture a little bit. And like I've mentioned a few times, like I'm online a lot, so it makes me take a step back sometimes too to and like think about things, right? So I really appreciate your your answer on that. Of course, this series is called The Most Interesting People on My Timeline, but in this segment, I turn it over to my guest to put me onto something new and tell me about the most interesting people on their timeline.
Yeah, I mean, I actually made a list. I know this is super informal, but I was like, I can't forget. Like, I do have a lot of really dope artists that I work with. Um, and my first and foremost, one of my soul siblings, Crystal Dino, she does freedom movement alignment, and she's my guru. She's my Filipino martial arts teacher, and she does house dance as well as all kinds of dance. She also did hip hop, and has some Filipino cultural roots as well. And so she's one of my homies that I create with. She's an amazing art therapist that works with youth. And I'm really grateful. It's been almost like, has it been almost 20 years? No, wait, we met in like 2012. Okay, it's only been 10 years since we've been creating. And I'm in a bunch of collectives. Like I mentioned, I'm with Babailan Collective and Shiro Collective. Babailan Collective, we do a lot of healing and holistic work. We work with herbs and sound and community gathering. And I have three fellow collective members, and that's Sister Candace from Nourishing Your Liberty, DJ Wen Love from Elmwood Organics, and Sin of Hina Waters Wellness. And we each are sound healers, herbalists. We all create our own different products. And I'm really grateful to build with them. I'm also part of Shiro Collective, which was founded by Shiro's, who was the MC I mentioned that was one of our main artists at Drop In Gems. She's super dope. She's an amazing creator, but also always trying to bring together femmes within cultural work, specifically rooted in hip hop. And we have a few other collective members, Christine Sa or Shorty. She does these amazing syrups. She helps so many different businesses and organizations, but she's primarily an educator and works with folks in special ed. She's an um, amazing community member. We also have Rihanna Hartley, who's an amazing consultant, she was in communication work, I want to say, and she did a lot of nonprofit work and started out as a B girl, and was one of the first POC people in the yoga world here in Tongva. So she's been holding it down over there. There's also Robin Coates, who's an amazing indigenous sister who does a lot of work within the fashion realm. And I have my girl Jackie and my homie Kiki. They're Filipinos who grew up in Pacifica. Kiki's from Hawaii, who's also Samoan, and Jackie is from grew up in Guam. And so they're amazing people that I built with. They co-created Gem with me. Jackie's an amazing graphic designer, an overall artist. She bakes, she does everything really, and she's a martial artist. And Kiki's like a really dope Pacific Islander advocate, health advocate, as well as a guide within this camp that supports youth that have cancer. And so they're just an amazing rep. They work for EPIC, Empowered Pacific Islanders. And so those are some of the folks. And I also wanted to mention Magnolia Yang Xiao Ya, who's an amazing dancer and PhD candidate at UC Riverside of Hmong lineage, from Minnesota, that I've been building with for a few years. She directed our rehearsals and choreography for two of the songs from Drop In Jam. And my last person, I know I had a whole list, right? Is Sammy Jimenez, who has a show this Sunday and is offering a free workshop on Saturday in San Diego. They're a non-binary trans artist that is from San Diego, movement artist, visual artist, fashion designer, and they're a really dope Taurus that I'm celebrating this weekend. So all these people. Oh, last but not least, DJ AIT from Honolulu. They're a Samoan DJ that really does a lot of work in public radio and talking about the political roots of public radio, specifically in Hawaii. And I really love the music that they play. They're also queer, um, kapwa, and just really, really, really has been a super supportive person within the music community and a big connection for me in the islands. So yeah, just singing all their praises. Everybody's super dope.
Thank you. Thank you. It sounds like such like a dope community, and everyone is so multifaceted, and just it sounds amazing. So thank you for sharing that and like spotlighting them here. Is there anything that's like coming up in the future for you? Anything you want to plug, that how can people connect with you and keep up with you?
Absolutely. So I just dropped the track called undocu on Monday. I produced it, I wrote it, I performed it. I also am dropping the music video, the visualizer next week. There's interviews and the song and different visuals that are now in Crossings TV, which is an API TV station. It's going to be streaming throughout the month of May. And I also will be featured in the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival next Thursday for my music video. Can't wait. And so please come through. It's at 9:30. It's part of the Cinema Musica Shorts program. And it's public, so it's going to be at Regal Live. I think Theater 10. So that's really exciting and coming up. I'm going to be performing this Saturday at Tiandaan, which is a community market in Walnut, California. It's Filipinx led. And let's see, is there anything else? I think that's all for now. Yeah, I'm just working on just continuing to release music, and I do have another reason why I pushed Gem was because I have like 2 to 3 other albums that I need to get out. So I was just like, I'm done hoarding music. Like I'll probably drop an album with just cover art and no other like additional probably not too elaborate of a show later this year, just because I just want to work on new music, but I have a lot of older music that needs to go out. So you can find me at soultree.me. That's my website. You could also, that's SOULTREE.me. And you can find me as Soultree's Music on Instagram and most social media outlets. And yeah, I'm always offering services. So you can also book me for tarot, Reiki, body work, or herbal support through my website. And I also have a bunch of products that I'm getting out there and a bunch of merch that we're trying to get out there for Gem. So holla at me. I want to call out all the sponsors, all the people, the funders out there, the sweet citizens. Come on, send your money, send your coins this way. Support undocumented artists, support queer artists, support migrant artists and femmes and thems. Thank you so
Amazing.
much, Tania.
Amazing. I'm really excited about Can't Wait at Laugh, because it's one of my favorite songs from like your work. I have it on this playlist called Free Sunshine. I live in Oregon. It has been cloudy like forever. So I'll put that playlist on. And I've added that in there, and it's a lot of joy. All of Soultree's work is linked in the description, and you can head over to taniadoes.com/Soultree for links, visuals, and bonus content. And make sure to follow them on Instagram and Spotify at Soultree. They will be vending and performing at multiple events soon, including the Kumare Connection Gathering in Long Beach on June 17th, the Abrazos and Kali Luna Ice Cream Social on June 25th, and on June 26th, their interview on Crossings TV with the Slants Foundation is airing at 5 a.m. and 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. They have so many amazing things going on and that they're doing. We'd love to see it, so definitely follow them on Instagram and go to their website so you can keep up with all of that and see where the next show is and when they will be vending at an event near you. Also, make sure to follow me, your host, on Instagram and TikTok at taniadoes, and subscribe to my YouTube channel to stay up to date on this series, as well as following us on Spotify. The next episode is the season finale of this Sonic Slay season. This season feels like it went by so quickly, but that just might be that the uploads were consistent every week. So next week's guest has started his own record label, has a couple short films in production, and in a music and fashion crossover, his company also collaborated with the one and only Laquan Smith. Stay connected, stay creating beautiful things, and I'll catch y'all in the next episode.